Toss-up number 1, literature. At the beginning of this work, a boy named Randolph complains that he hasn't had candy for 100 weeks. Mrs. Costello disapproves of this work's title character, who flirts with mustaches and visits the Colosseum with Mr. Giovanelli, causing her to contract Roman fever. The expatriate Winterbourne is charmed by an uncultivated girl from Schenectady in for 10 points, What Novella by Henry James. Toss-up. Number 2, fine arts. This man wrote an operetta about a viceroy of Spanish Peru. Piccolo counterpoint decorates the trio of one of his pieces that features the lyrics, Hurrah for the flag of the free. This composer of El Capitan also wrote a work named for a DC newspaper. A brass instrument similar to the tuba is named after, for 10 points, what American composer whose marches include the Washington Post and the Stars and Stripes Forever. Toss-up 3, miscellaneous. Liquids and gases, considered as construction materials, have a value of 0 for this kind of strength. It determines a beam's resistance to deformation from transverse loading, and its namesake forces are equal and opposite forces that slide parallel cross-sections of a beam past each other. Tensile and compressive strength are contracted with for 10 points. What kind of strength that also resists cutting? Toss-up number 4, math. One of these figures goes through the D Longchamp's point, 9-point center, and centroid of a triangle. In polar coordinates, the equation r equals secant theta generates one of these shapes. Euclid's fifth postulate concerns two of them that will never intersect and are thus parallel. For 10 points, name this figure whose graph has a constant slope, the infinite extension of a segment. Toss-up number 5, science. This quantity depends on time for thixotropic materials. When it is 0, the Navier-Stokes equations reduce to Euler's equations. Its kinematic and dynamic forms can be measured in Stokes and Pause, and it is assumed constant for a Newtonian fluid. This quantity vanishes as liquid helium-4 cools below the lambda point and becomes a superfluid. For 10 points, name this property of internal resistance to flow. Toss-up number 6, science. Symptoms of this disease can include Banworth syndrome and Bell's palsy, through chronic headaches and joint pain are most common. Doxycycline is used to treat this disease transmitted by members of genus Ixodes and caused by bacteria of genus Borrelia. Erythema migrans and bullseye rash often occur on the site of the deer tick bite that transmits, for 10 points, what disease named for a town in Connecticut? Toss-up number 7, math. Pencil and paper ready. Ray is playing roulette at an American casino and needs to calculate the probability of winning 2 consecutive bets if he bets on red both times. Since an American roulette wheel has 38 spaces, of which 18 are black, 18 are red, and 2 are green, he begins by computing the odds of winning one bet. For 10 points, what is the probability of winning 2 consecutive roulette bets on red? Toss-up number 8, literature. In one poem by this author, the speaker muses, "I'd like to get away from Earth a while, and then come back to it and begin over." In another work by this poet, a boy gives a rueful laugh after a buzzsaw leaps out and cuts off his hand. This poet of birches and out also described a choice made by a traveler in a yellow wood where 2 roads diverge. For 10 points, name this poet of "The Road Not Taken." Toss-up number 9, math. A function has an associated other function known by this term if and only if it is a bijection. In trigonometry, this type of function is often denoted by the prefix arc. A matrix only has one of them if its determinant is not 0. Multiplying a matrix with this other type of matrix gives the identity matrix. For 10 points, give this term for which 0 is the additive example and 1 is the multiplicative example. Toss-up number 10, science. VLBI combines signals from several of these devices that are separated to increase the effective baseline. Martin Schmidt used one of these devices to discover quasars. The NRAO manages the very large array of these devices, which have large parabolic dishes. For 10 points, name these telescopes that detect the longest wavelength form of electromagnetic radiation, which is also used by AM and FM stations. Toss-up number 11, literature. In a confession of his shortcomings, this man says, "I get in the dumps at times, and I generally have chemicals about." His clients include Helen Stoner, whose sister is killed by a swamp adder, and Jabez Wilson, who is employed by the Red-Headed League. He is sometimes consulted by Inspector Lestrade and lives at 221B Baker Street. Dr. John Watson assists, for 10 points, what detective created by Arthur Conan Doyle? Toss-up number 12, math. Pencil and paper ready. Fiona took a canoe trip on a river whose current speed is unknown. When paddling downstream, she went 60 miles in 6 hours, but the return trip upstream at the same paddling speed took 10 hours. To find the speed of the river current, she wrote out 2 equations in 2 unknowns and carefully substituted. For 10 points, compute the speed of the river current in miles per hour. Toss-up number 13, science. In rate equations for reactions of this order, concentrations are directly subtracted from each other. The thermodynamic law of this number implies that the transitive property holds for thermal equilibrium. A perfect crystal has this much entropy at negative 273 degrees Celsius, which is also equal to this number on the Kelvin scale. For 10 points, give this number whose absolute form is the lowest possible temperature. Toss-up number 14, literature. This object and a ship's rudder are typically depicted in the hands of Fortuna. According to Ovid, the Naiads brought this item to Abundantia after it was created during a wrestling match between Heracles and a river god, Achelous. In another myth, Zeus breaks this object off of the goat Amalthea, and it becomes an unending source of nourishment. For 10 points, name this horn of plenty from Greco-Roman myth. Toss-up number 15, social studies. This man published The Discovery of Guana, a book about his fruitless search for the kingdom of El Dorado in South America. His supposed involvement in the main plot and his secret marriage to one of Elizabeth I's ladies-in-waiting earned him 2 spells of imprisonment in the Tower of London. The Roanoke colony was planned by, for 10 points, what English explorer whose name was given to the capital of North Carolina? Toss-up number 16, fine arts. The Santa Maria Gloriosa de Frari is home to this artist Pesaro altarpiece. This artist depicted a cheetah-drawn chariot in his Bacchus Ariane. His best-known painting shows a brown and white dog on a bed and a young girl rummaging in a chest in the background. The nude central figure of that painting was the basis for Manet's Olympia. For 10 points, name this Venetian painter who created the Venus of Urbino. Toss-up number 17, social studies. The afternoon service for this holiday includes the reading of the book of Jonah. A set of prayers for this holiday includes the Ashamnu and the Alhate, during which worshippers strike their own chests. In temple times, the Tetragrammaton was pronounced on this day, which begins with a prayer asking for release from all vows, the Kol Nidre. 9 days after Rosh Hashanah is, for 10 points, what Jewish Day of Atonement? Toss-up number 18, fine arts. This artist's wax figure of a 14-year-old girl was the only sculpture he exhibited while alive. A woman stares vacantly near a glass of the tidal green liquid in his L'Absent. In waiting, he showed a chaperone in black sitting on a bench by a girl in a white tutu, a type of figure he also depicted in works like Ballet Rehearsal. For 10 points, name this impressionist known for paintings of dancers. Toss-up number 19, literature. One author with this surname wrote about the consumptive Margaret Gautier, who leaves her lover to protect his family's honor in the play The Lady of Camellias. Another author with this surname wrote about Fernand Mondego, a resident of Marseille who marries Mercedes after sending a letter accusing Edmond Dantes of treason. For 10 points, give the surname of the author of The Count of Monte Cristo. Toss-up number 20, science. This molecule's precursor is methylated by the enzyme PNMT. Both it and its precursor are catecholamines stored in chromaffin cells. It binds to beta receptors to trigger the conversion of glycogen to glucose in the liver, and it is produced by namesake glands atop the kidneys. For 10 points, name this hormone carried in pens to treat anaphylaxis that is also released in the fight-or-flight response. Toss-up number 21, social studies. This entity was named the Victoria Barrier by its namesake discoverer, who claimed there's no more chance of sailing through that than through the cliffs of Dover. A similar structure named for Filchner and Rahn lies to the east and does Mary Byard Land. McMurdo Station lies near this entity that it is south-southeast of New Zealand. For 10 points, what entity the size of France is Antarctica's largest ice shelf? Toss-up number 22, social studies. Archbishop Sancroft opposed this event during the Convention Parliament. The Act of Toleration was passed as a result of this event, whose participants subsequently fought the Battle of the Boyne in Ireland. Members of the Whig Party supported this event, which removed England's last Catholic king. James II was deposed by, for 10 points, what 1688 revolution that made William and Mary the rulers of England? Toss-up number 23, social studies. When this man tried to lead a charge in person at the Battle of the Wilderness, soldiers of the Texas Brigade encouraged him to avoid enemy fire. After the Battle of Seven Pines, he replaced the wounded Joseph E. Johnston. This general held off George McClellan at Antietam, but was criticized for ordering Pickett's charge. For 10 points, what leader of the Army of Northern Virginia lost the Battle of Gettysburg? Toss-up number 24, math. Pencil and paper ready. Jane needs to find the sum of the first 7 terms of the geometric sequence that begins 1, 2, and 4. She realizes that the nth term of this sequence is always 2 raised to the n minus 1 power, so the 7th term will be 2 raised to the 6th power. By summing the powers of 2 from 2 to the 0 to 2 to the 6th, Jane computes, for 10 points, what sum of the 7 terms in the geometric series?